16-year-old Jamal Reed had one arm full of groceries when he heard it. A crash, then a weak voice from inside the house. "Help me." He didn't think twice. He dropped the bags, ran to the back, forced open a window, and climbed inside. What he found froze him. An elderly woman collapsed on the floor, clutching her chest, struggling to breathe. Jamal moved fast, called 911, found her medication, held her steady. He was seconds away from saving her life. But across the street, a white neighbor was watching, and instead of helping, he picked up his phone and said 5 words that changed everything. "There's a black boy inside." Minutes later, police stormed the house. They didn't ask questions. They didn't wait for answers. They saw Jamal kneeling beside the woman he was trying to save and slammed him to the floor in handcuffs. While she fought for her life, she had to fight for his too, because in that moment, the boy who came to help had already been turned into the suspect. If you think you already know how this story ends, you don't. Because what happened after Jamal was thrown to the floor didn't just expose one man, it exposed an entire neighborhood. And before this is over, the same people who watched him get handcuffed will be forced to face exactly who he really is. So, subscribe now, because this isn't just a story about what went wrong. It's about what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried. Now, listen carefully, because the moment Jamal stepped onto that street, he had no idea someone had already been watching him. Jamal Reed had been working since he was 13. His childhood was taken when a drunk driver crossed a median and killed his father. Now, with his sister needing a constant supply of inhalers, while his mother works 2 jobs yet still counts coins before payday, Jamal had to adapt. Mornings in the summer, he stocked boxes at Mr. Sal's corner grocery. Afternoons, he delivered groceries on his bike to elderly residents who could no longer drive, lift, or stand for long. He charged almost nothing, sometimes nothing at all. Most of the older folks on the route tipped him anyway, and Maple Glen Drive was not even his neighborhood. It was 3 blocks over from the apartment complex where Jamal, his mother Rochelle, and sister Aaliyah lived in a 2-bedroom unit above a laundromat that never closed. Maple Glen was wealthier, whiter, older. Many of the residents were retired. Some were kind, and some were polite from a distance. Some looked at him like he was a stain on the landscaping. Jamal knew the difference. Miss Evelyn Carter had been the first one to treat him like he belonged there. She was 82, white, widowed, sharp-tongued, and too independent for her own good. Her son lived in Arizona. Her daughter called but rarely visited. A bad hip and mild heart failure had made steps, shopping, and long walks risky. Jamal started helping her after seeing her struggle with a case of bottled water outside the local grocery one rainy afternoon. He had carried it to her car. The next week he had carried her groceries inside. After that, he had become part of her routine. He never called it charity. She never called it help. That was their deal. And for 2 months no one seemed to care. Until a new family moved into the gray colonial house across the street. Their name was Whitmore. Ryan Whitmore was the kind of man who wore tucked polo shirts on weekends and said words like standards when he really meant who belonged and who didn't. 46, regional sales director, proud homeowner, self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood. His wife kept mostly quiet, his teenage son copied his sneer, and his front yard looked like it had its own military code. The first time Ryan saw Jamal walking up Evelyn's driveway, he froze at his mailbox and tracked him with the cold concentration of someone looking for proof of what he already believed. The second time, he asked Evelyn through a smile too tight to trust, "You know that boy?" Evelyn had answered, "Better than I know half the fools on this street." Ryan laughed, but his eyes did not. The third time, he took a picture. By the fourth, he had started texting neighbors. Unknown young male. Repeated visits. Suspicious pattern. That was the language men like Ryan used. Clean enough to sound reasonable. Dirty enough to be dangerous. Jamal never saw the texts. He only noticed doors closing faster. porch conversations going quiet when he rode past, curtains shifting, one woman clutching her purse while he balanced 3 grocery bags and a loaf of bread. The message was clear. He did not look like help, he looked like threat. Still, he kept showing up, because old people still needed to eat, because dignity doesn't stop mattering just because somebody else is prejudiced. Because Jamal had decided long ago that if the world insisted on judging him before he opened his mouth, then he would let his actions speak first. But that day on Evelyn's porch, action was running out of time. He knocked once. No answer. He knocked harder. "Miss Evelyn." Still nothing. Then he heard it again. A weak thud from inside. Then something scraping. Jamal dropped the grocery bag on the porch and tried the handle. Locked. His pulse spiked. "Miss Evelyn." Nothing. Across the street, Ryan Whitmore stepped out onto his lawn with his phone in his hand. Jamal backed up and looked through the narrow side window beside the door. All he could see was the edge of a table, a lamp, and part of the hallway rug. Then a sound came again. Fainter now. Not a knock. A struggle. Jamal made the decision in less than 2 seconds. He jumped off the porch, ran around the side of the house, and checked the back gate. Unlatched. He pushed through. The kitchen window was open about 3 inches. "Miss Evelyn, it's Jamal." A broken voice floated from somewhere deeper inside. "Help." That was enough. Jamal shoved the window higher, dragged a patio chair under it, and pulled himself through the frame, scraping his forearm on the latch hard enough to draw blood. Outside, Ryan Whitmore spoke into his phone. "Yes, I need police here now. A black male just broke into my elderly neighbor's house." Jamal ran toward the hallway. Evelyn Carter was on the floor near the base of the stairs, one hand twisted under her, the other clawing weakly at the runner rug. Her face was pale. A pill organizer lay spilled beside her. One slipper had fallen halfway off. A framed picture had shattered nearby. She tried to speak, but only a broken breath came out. Jamal dropped to his knees. "Miss Evelyn, hey, look at me." Her lips trembled. "Chest?" His stomach turned cold. He snatched the cordless phone from the side table and hit 911 with bloody fingers, shouting the address before the operator could finish speaking. "My neighbor fell. Elderly woman, trouble breathing, chest pain. She's conscious but weak." The operator started asking questions. Jamal answered as fast as he could, kneeling beside Evelyn, keeping his voice steady only because panic would be useless. He found the nitroglycerin bottle under the table where it had rolled. "1 pill under your tongue, okay? Just like the doctor said." Her hand shook too hard to manage it. He helped her. Outside, sirens began to rise in the distance, and then he heard a man pounding on the front door. Not paramedics, police, and they were not coming in to save him. "Police! Come out with your hands up." Jamal froze. Evelyn gripped his wrist with surprising force. Her eyes widened. She knew, even in pain, even on the floor, she knew exactly what kind of danger had just entered her home. "Don't move," she whispered. But the officers were already moving. The front door crashed open with a splintering bang that shook the frame. "Hands where I can see them." 2 officers stormed into the hallway, guns drawn. Jamal instinctively raised both hands. "I'm helping her. Get down. She fell. She needs an ambulance." "On the ground now." Evelyn tried to speak, but one officer had already grabbed Jamal by the shoulder and slammed him face first into the hardwood. The cordless phone skidded away. His cheek cracked against the floor. A knee drove into his back. "I didn't do anything." "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting." He wasn't. But truth is cheap when fear has a badge and a target. On the floor, Evelyn found enough breath to shout one word. "No." The room stopped for half a second. Officer Mark Delaney, broad-shouldered and red-faced, kept Jamal pinned anyway. The younger officer looked from the boy to the old woman and hesitated. "She's having a medical emergency," Jamal gasped into the floorboards. I called 911. Check the phone. Check the phone. Outside, more voices gathered. Neighbors, watching, always watching. Ryan Whitmore stepped through the broken front doorway just far enough to be seen but not touched by consequence. He pointed like a man identifying evidence. That's him. He climbed through the back. Officer Delaney tightened the cuffs. You know him. Ma'am. Evelyn's face twisted in pain and fury. He helps me, she choked out. He saves me, you idiot. That should have ended it. It didn't, because prejudice hates being embarrassed. It doubles down when challenged. Delaney frowned as if the answer irritated him. Sir, step back. We'll sort it out. Sort it out. While an old woman clutched her chest on the floor, while the boy who called for help lay cuffed beside her, while the man who made the false accusation stood clean on the other side of the room. Then the paramedics burst in. Everything shifted at once. Medical bags opened. Commands snapped. Oxygen mask. Blood pressure cuff. Gurney wheels. The younger officer finally retrieved the fallen cordless phone, saw the live 911 call record still on screen, and his expression changed. He looked at Delaney. Delaney looked away. Jamal pushed himself up onto one elbow despite the cuffs. Please tell them about her meds. Nitroglycerin, top drawer in the kitchen too. She took one. The paramedic glanced over. You gave her nitro? Yes, sir. Good call. That landed in the room like a slap. Ryan Whitmore's face lost some color. Evelyn, half lifted onto the stretcher, forced off the oxygen mask just long enough to point a trembling finger straight at him. You, she rasped. Get out of my house. The watching neighbors went silent, but the humiliation wasn't enough. Not yet. Because outside, on the sidewalk, someone had been recording, and before Jamal was even shoved into the back of the patrol car, pending investigation, the first clip was already flying through the neighborhood group chat. Black teen arrested inside elderly widow's home. No context, no truth. Just the image. Exactly the kind that ruins lives before facts can lace their shoes. Jamal sat in the back seat, wrists burning against metal cuffs, staring through the partition while his blood dried along his forearm. He had helped save a life, and somehow he was the one being treated like a criminal. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. One of the officers pulled it out. Screen lit up. Mom. And Jamal knew the next disaster was just beginning. Rochelle Reed arrived at the hospital still wearing her nursing assistant scrubs under a cheap cardigan, hair scarf half loose, panic and fury fighting across her face. Nobody had called her officially. She had found out because a woman from the apartment complex sent her a social media clip with 3 words. Is this Jamal? By the time Rochelle got to St. Agnes Memorial, yet the video was spreading far outside Maple Glen. People were already arguing in the comments. Some demanded charges. Some said wait for facts. Some called Jamal brave. Others called him a thug before learning his name. That is how quickly a black child can be turned into content. Officer Delaney stood near the ER intake desk writing his report when Rochelle came through the automatic doors like a storm. Where is my son? He looked up, annoyed first, cautious second. Ma'am, if you're referring to the minor detained at Maple Glen, he is not under arrest at this time. Then take those cuffs off him and answer the question I asked. People in the waiting area turned to look. Rochelle stepped closer. Where is my son? The younger officer, Morales, pointed toward a side corridor. He's with the supervisor now, ma'am. Rochelle moved. Delaney tried to stop her. You can't just barge in there. She whipped around so fast he almost flinched. My child was handcuffed for saving someone's life. I can do a whole lot more than barge. Strong people do not always look strong. Sometimes they look exhausted and underpaid and one rent cycle away from collapse. But when Rochelle Reed walked down that corridor, even the hospital staff shifted aside. Jamal sat in a small consultation room with his hands finally free and a paper towel pressed to the cut on his arm. He looked bigger and smaller at the same time, the way teenage boys do when they're trying not to cry because they think it will make things worse. The second Rochelle saw the red marks on his wrists, something in her face hardened beyond anger. She crossed the room and cupped the side of his head. "Did they hurt you?" Jamal swallowed. "I'm okay." That wasn't true. Not because bones were broken, because something else had cracked, something quieter. Rochelle looked at the supervisor. "I want every name, every body cam, and every report preserved." The supervisor, Lieutenant Harris, older and more careful than Delaney, nodded. "Ma'am, we're sorting out what happened." "No," Rochelle said. "You're late. What happened already happened." Then the ER doors opened again and a paramedic stepped in. "The woman is stable." Jamal exhaled for what felt like the first time in 20 minutes. "Can I see her?" he asked. "Briefly," the paramedic said. "She asked for you." Delaney's jaw tightened. They brought Jamal and Rochelle into a monitored room where Evelyn Carter lay under warm blankets, an IV in her arm, oxygen tubing under her nose. But color returning to her face. She looked old in a way Jamal had never seen before. Fragile. Angered by fragility. The moment she saw him, her eyes filled. "Boy," she whispered. Jamal moved to the bed. "You scared me." "You climbed through a kitchen window for me." "You told me not to race the devil," Jamal responded. She gave a weak huff of laughter that turned into a cough. Then she looked at Rochelle. "This is your son?" Rochelle nodded. Evelyn's voice sharpened. "Then you raised him better than this town deserved." No one in that room missed the target. She motioned for Lieutenant Harris. "That man across the street lied," she said. "He's been watching this child for weeks like he was a criminal. Jamal brings my groceries, carries my water, checks on me. My own children don't show up half as much." Harris pulled out a notebook. "Mrs. Carter, can you identify the man?" "Ryan Whitmore." "Did you give Jamal permission to be in your home?" Evelyn stared at him like he had insulted arithmetic. "I gave him permission months ago. He has a spare key." The room went still. Jamal blinked. "Wait, what?" Evelyn looked smug for a full half-second. "Top drawer in my kitchen. I put your name on the envelope 2 weeks ago. I was waiting for the right time to tell you." Even Rochelle almost laughed. Lieutenant Harris did not, because that one fact took the floor out from under the whole police narrative. Not just mistaken entry, authorized access, good faith emergency response, false accusation, improper detention. Suddenly, this was no longer embarrassing. It was serious. And Ryan Whitmore had no idea how quickly the ground was about to move beneath him. By nightfall, the street video had reached local community pages, but new details were leaking now. The original poster, a woman 2 houses down, deleted her caption after learning the intruder had called 911 and helped administer medication. Too late. Screenshots existed. Comments existed. Damage existed. Then a second video surfaced, this one from a teenager on a bike across the street. No audio at first, just footage of police dragging Jamal from the hallway while Evelyn, still on the floor, yelled and pointed. Then the audio cut in. "He helps me." That line spread faster than the accusation, and somebody did something Ryan Whitmore had not planned for. They started digging. A retired teacher from the neighborhood posted that Jamal had been delivering groceries to 3 elderly residents all summer. A church deacon said the boy once repaired a broken porch rail for free. Mr. Sal from the store uploaded security footage showing Jamal paying out of pocket for items when one senior customer came up short. Then Mrs. Alvarez, 87 and mean in the best possible way, recorded a video from her recliner. "That boy brings me soup and argues with me about sodium. If any of you called the police on him, you ought to be ashamed enough to move." Now the comments were shifting. Not enough to fix the lie, but enough to expose it. Ryan Whitmore sat at his kitchen island refreshing his phone while his wife whispered that maybe he should stay offline. His son had stopped smirking hours ago. The neighborhood thread he had once controlled was turning on him sentence by sentence. Did you actually see him stealing? Did you know the woman? Why call the police before checking? Why mention his race? Ryan typed, deleted, typed again, concerned for safety, followed protocol, didn't know full story, weak, cowardly, transparent. Then his phone rang, caller ID, corporate HR. He stared at it and did not answer. Across town, Jamal did not see any of that yet. He was back home in the apartment, sitting at the tiny kitchen table while Rochelle cleaned the cut on his arm more gently than her rage suggested she felt. Aaliyah, 12 and sharp as a blade, sat nearby with swollen eyes and fists tight in her lap. "They put you in cuffs?" she asked. Jamal shrugged too casually. "For a minute." She looked at the wrist marks and burst into tears again. Rochelle set the antiseptic down. "Look at me." He did. "You did the right thing." He nodded once. "No," she said. "Look at me and hear it. That you did the right thing." His jaw trembled. This time the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the kind boys try to hide by dropping their chin and rubbing their face too hard. Humiliation, fear, anger, relief, all mixed up. "I thought if I moved wrong," he said quietly, "they were gonna—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Rochelle closed her eyes for 1 second, maybe to pray, maybe to stop herself from breaking the plate in her hands. Then someone knocked at the apartment door. 3 slow knocks. Rochelle stiffened. Nobody expected visitors. Jamal stood carefully and moved to the peephole. On the other side stood Lieutenant Harris, and behind him stood a woman in a navy blazer holding a folder. Jamal opened the door halfway. Harris removed his cap. "Evening, this is Attorney Dana Brooks. Mrs. Carter requested we bring over something important." Rochelle did not smile. "Why is a lawyer at my door?" Dana answered plainly. "Because your son may need one before this is over." That changed the room temperature. Brooks stepped in and laid the folder on the table. "Mrs. Carter has formally stated that Jamal Reed acted as an invited guest and emergency responder in her home today. She also wants to pursue action against Mr. Whitmore and possibly against the department, depending on what body cam review confirms." Rochelle folded her arms. "Possibly." Dana opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots of neighborhood messages. Pictures Ryan Whitmore had taken of Jamal over multiple days. Captions, descriptions. Suspicious black teen returning repeatedly. Maybe casing homes. Watch your elderly neighbors. Jamal stared at the pages, and he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't a one-time lie. This man had been building a case against him in advance, creating an audience, planting fear, preparing the ground so when the police arrived, people would already believe the worst. Dana tapped one screenshot. "Mrs. Carter's niece sent these. They were taken from a private neighborhood thread before Mr. Whitmore deleted some of them." Rochelle's voice dropped low. "He targeted my child." Dana met her eyes. "Yes." Lieutenant Harris looked sick about it now. "There's more," Dana said. "One of the posts mentioned wanting to get ahead of it before something happens. Another claimed Jamal may have been checking which elderly residents are home alone." Aaliyah gasped. Jamal didn't. He had gone past shock. Now he was somewhere colder. Because once you realize someone has been quietly narrating you as a threat, every glance from the past month starts making sense all at once. The tightened purses, the curtains, the silence, the photos, the way Ryan had already sounded certain on that lawn before anything happened. He wanted to punch something. Instead, he asked the only useful question. "What now?" Dana Brooks slid one more document across the table. A notarized letter. "Mrs. Carter wants to hire you." That threw everyone. Jamal frowned. "For what?" Dana's mouth almost smiled. "Official neighborhood assistance, deliveries, check-ins, minor support tasks, paid weekly through her estate account. She says if this street is going to keep seeing you, then they're going to see you with paperwork." For the first time all day, a bitter laugh escaped Rochelle, and that sounded exactly like an old woman who had survived enough life to weaponize legality. But Dana wasn't done. She also wants the Homeowners Association at tomorrow evening's emergency meeting. Rochelle narrowed her eyes. Meeting? Lieutenant Harris nodded reluctantly. This blew up fast. The board called a meeting. Dana looked at Jamal. "Mrs. Carter wants you there." Jamal leaned back. After everything that had happened, after being handcuffed in front of strangers, after becoming a clip online, after realizing a grown man had been building public suspicion around him for weeks, the last thing he wanted was to stand in a room full of the same people and let them look at him again. Dana seemed to read that on his face. "She said to tell you this exactly," Dana added. Then, in a surprisingly accurate imitation of Evelyn's dry old voice, she said, "If that coward gets to tell lies in public, then my grocery boy gets to tell the truth in public." Aaliyah snorted through her tears. Jamal looked down at the papers. Every instinct said, hide, stay home, heal privately, let adults fight. But another voice, older than his age and forged by too many things he'd already survived, said this: "If you disappear now, they keep the last image of you in cuffs." So he looked up. "I'll go." And across Maple Glen Drive, Ryan Whitmore was still convincing himself he could talk his way out of what was coming. The emergency HOA meeting started at 6:30 the next evening in the clubhouse at the entrance of Maple Glen. White columns, beige walls, bad coffee, the sort of place designed to make petty authority feel official. Every seat was filled. Homeowners, spouses, a few older residents with canes and oxygen carts, 2 local reporters near the back, phones out everywhere. The board members sat at a long table up front, rigid and rattled. On one side sat Ryan Whitmore in a navy blazer, chin lifted too high. On the other sat Evelyn Carter in a wheelchair, pale but blazing, with Dana Brooks beside her. When Jamal walked in with Rochelle and Aaliyah, the room shifted like a pressure front. Some people looked ashamed. Some looked curious. A few looked defensive. Jamal wore a clean black button-down Rochelle had ironed twice. The faint bruise on his cheek had yellowed at the edges. The cuff marks were hidden by his sleeves. He took his seat. Ryan Whitmore looked at him for a second and then away. The board president cleared his throat. "We are here to address yesterday's unfortunate incident." Evelyn snapped, "Unfortunate? A child was handcuffed in my home because your neighborhood pet detective panicked at melanin." Several people coughed to hide laughter. Ryan did not. Dana rose first and laid out the facts with brutal order. Authorized helper, established pattern of care, emergency medical intervention, 911 call record, witness statements, neighborhood posts, deleted images, false assumptions, reputational harm. Then Lieutenant Harris, forced into public professionalism, confirmed that preliminary review showed Jamal had been the initial 911 caller and had acted in a life-preserving capacity. Ryan's lawyer, because of course Ryan had brought one, tried to frame it as a misunderstanding driven by concern. Dana turned and asked one question that gutted that defense. Then why did Mr. Whitmore photograph a minor repeatedly over several weeks and distribute warnings about him before this incident ever occurred? No answer worth hearing came. Then the board president made a mistake. He said, perhaps Jamal would like to say a few words so the community can understand his perspective. Perspective. That word almost ruined it. Too soft, too safe. But Jamal stood anyway. The room got very still. He walked to the front without notes, without theatrics, without any of the performance adults often expect from wounded children. He stood behind the podium, hands flat against the wood, and looked out at the people who had watched him, doubted him, whispered about him, recorded him, and shared him. Then he spoke. "My name is Jamal Reed. I'm 16. Nothing flashy, Good. Let them lean in. I work at Mr. Sal's grocery store in the mornings. In the afternoons, I deliver food and supplies to older people who need help. Some live in my neighborhood. Some live here. He turned slightly toward Evelyn. Miss Carter is one of them. Then back to the room. I started helping her because she needed help. That's it. Not because it looked good. Not because somebody told me to. Because she's a person. A few eyes dropped. Jamal kept going. Yesterday, I saw something was wrong. I heard her inside. I got in the house and called for help. That part saved her. The part after that, he paused. That part could have ruined me. Nobody moved. When those officers came in, they didn't see a kid helping. They saw what somebody had already told them to see. Somebody in this neighborhood had been taking pictures of me, posting about me, warning people about me. So by the time I got shoved to the floor, I was already guilty in people's minds. Ryan shifted in his seat. Jamal's voice did not rise. It got sharper. You know what's crazy? I still would have gone in that house. Because if I had stood outside worrying about what this street would think of me, Miss Carter might not be here right now. Evelyn started crying quietly. So, yeah, I'm angry. I should be. My little sister saw me online in handcuffs. My mom had to come to a hospital and wonder whether helping somebody almost got her son killed. And some of y'all watched all this happen from behind phones. Silence. Then Jamal leaned slightly forward. But let me say the part some of you probably don't want to hear. This isn't just about one man calling the police. It's about how easy it was for all of you to believe him. The room held still as stone. If I was a white kid in soccer shorts carrying groceries to an old lady's porch every week, nobody takes my picture. Nobody starts a thread. Nobody says, suspicious pattern. Nobody turns me into a warning. Ryan's lawyer started to object. Dana said, "Sit down." He did. Jamal went on. You don't get credit now for finding out I was doing something kind. That's too late. The test was who you thought I was before you had proof. That one cut deep because it was true. He straightened. I'm not here because I need this neighborhood to like me. I'm here because you need to decide what kind of place this is. A place where elderly people get help, or a place where fear chases help away. Because next time somebody hears an old person calling for help, they might remember what happened to me and keep walking. You could feel the room flinch. That was the real charge, not what had happened, what would now fail to happen because of it. And that is how communities rot, not only through cruelty but through the punishment of kindness until nobody risks it again. Jamal looked directly at Ryan Whitmore. For the record, I forgive you enough not to become like you? Ryan blinked, stunned. But I do not excuse you, and I will not help you pretend this was concern. You tried to make me dangerous before you knew me. That was a choice. Then Jamal stepped back from the podium. The room exploded, not all at once, but like a dam cracking. One clap, then another, then half the room on its feet. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to change the energy. Enough to force the ones who stayed seated to feel exposed. Evelyn was openly weeping now, muttering, "That's my grocery boy," to no one in particular. Ryan Whitmore did not clap. Of course he didn't. Men like that only applaud stories where they remain innocent. Then a woman from the third row stood up. Mrs. Alvarez, 87, cane in one hand, fury in the other. I would like the minutes to reflect, she said loudly, that this boy has done more good on this street in one summer than some of you have done in 10 years of holiday potlucks and fake charity. A few people laughed, a few choked. Then another resident stood, then another. One by one, elderly neighbors Jamal had quietly helped began speaking. Groceries, medicine pickups, trash bins brought in, porch lights fixed, companionship, check-ins after storms. He had built a reputation in action. Ryan had built one in suspicion. Now, the whole room could finally see the difference. The board president, sweating now, announced an immediate motion to censure Ryan Whitmore from all HOA committees pending further review. Another board member, perhaps sensing the moral wind too late, proposed a formal apology to Jamal and the Reed family. Rochelle stood. No. That stopped them. She did not raise her voice. You do not heal this with a letter. She looked across the room, not at Ryan, but at everyone. You create something better than what happened. Dana Brooks leaned in and whispered with Evelyn. Evelyn nodded. Then Dana stood. Mrs. Carter would like to fund, jointly with participating neighbors, a volunteer elder support network for Maple Glen and adjacent blocks, deliveries, check-ins, maintenance assistance, youth stipends, training, oversight. Murmurs. Dana continued. And she wants the program named after Jamal Reed, if he agrees. Jamal's eyes widened. The room turned toward him again. He hadn't come for that. He had come because hiding would have made the lie heavier. Evelyn raised one frail hand. You said the street had to decide what kind of place this is, she told him. Help us force the answer. That was the moment. Not the arrest, not the humiliation, not even the speech. This, the point where pain could either become retreat or structure. Jamal looked at his mother. Rochelle gave one small nod. So he faced the room. I'll do it, he said, but only if it serves people outside this neighborhood too. A pause. Then he finished, because kindness doesn't need a gate code. That hit even harder than the first speech, and Ryan Whitmore, sitting in a room that no longer belonged to him, finally understood the full scale of his failure. He had tried to shrink a black boy into a threat. Instead, he had helped raise him into a symbol the whole city would remember. But the final blow had not yet landed. 3 days later, Maple Glen Drive looked different, not transformed into paradise. Communities don't become righteous because they were embarrassed on a Thursday. But something real had shifted. A sign stood outside the clubhouse. The Jamal Reed Community Care Initiative, supporting seniors with dignity, safety, and neighbor-led care. Mr. Sal provided weekly groceries at cost, cutting out his profit to support the program, and local churches offered volunteers. A retired nurse organized wellness checks. Teenagers from Jamal's side of town signed up faster than Maple Glen residents expected. Funny how service expands once gatekeepers lose control of the narrative. Local news ran the story again, this time with the right headline. Teen handcuffed while saving elderly woman leads new community care program. The original viral clip still existed. It always would, but now it had a second half. Because sometimes justice is not erasing the wound. It is forcing the world to witness who inflicted it and who rose anyway. As for Ryan Whitmore, consequences came in layers. His employer placed him on leave pending review of conduct that violated company community standards after the screenshots surfaced. The HOA removed him from committees. Neighbors stopped waving. One family moved their kids to the other side of the street when his son started repeating his father's version of safety. Most importantly, he lost the thing men like him protect most: moral cover. Now, everybody knew exactly what he had done. 1 week after the meeting, Jamal was restocking canned soup at Mr. Sal's when Ryan walked into the store alone. No blazer, no confidence, just a man stripped down to the plainness of his choices. Mr. Sal, who had zero patience for cowards, stared at him from behind the register without greeting him. Ryan approached slowly. Jamal kept stacking cans. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan said, "I wanted to apologize." Jamal did not look up. "That's for you, not me." Ryan swallowed. "I made assumptions." Jamal turned then. "No," he said. "You made preparations." That landed because it was exact. He went on. "You didn't just assume in the moment. You watched me, took pictures, told people to be afraid before anything happened. That wasn't confusion. That was construction. Ryan's face tightened. Maybe he had hoped for a neat redemption scene. He came to the wrong boy. I was trying to protect the neighborhood, Ryan said weakly. Jamal gave him a look so flat it almost hurt. From groceries? Ryan had no answer. Jamal picked up another can. She lived. That's the only reason this is an apology, and not a case. Ryan nodded once, shame finally breaking through the last shell of self-defense. Then he left. 6 months later, the program had expanded into 3 neighborhoods. Jamal, still 16, now trained volunteers every Saturday morning. Not because he had become some perfect saint. He was still a teenager, still got tired, still forgot homework sometimes, still argued with Aaliyah over cereal, still carried that flash of fear whenever a patrol car slowed near the curb. But purpose had found structure now. One afternoon, after a grocery run, Jamal wheeled Mrs. Carter's chair onto her porch and sat beside her with 2 bottles of water. The street was quiet. The summer heat had softened. Somewhere down the block, kids shouted over a basketball game. "You know," Evelyn said, "you ruined my reputation." Jamal smirked. "How?" "I used to be the meanest old woman on this street." "You still are." She nodded. "Fair." Then her expression changed. "I need you to hear this. What happened to you was evil." Jamal stared at the sidewalk. She continued. "But what you did after? Yeah, that was power." He didn't answer for a while. Finally he said, "I was scared." Evelyn snorted. "Only idiots do brave things without fear." That made him laugh. Then she leaned back and looked out over Maple Glen Drive, where more than one porch now had volunteer delivery tags hanging from the rails, where people nodded to Jamal by name, where old suspicion had not disappeared but no longer ruled unchallenged. "I used to think neighborhoods were built by property lines," she said. Jamal followed her gaze. "What do you think now?" She smiled, thin and sharp. "They're built by whoever shows up when somebody calls for help." Jamal heard a voice and chose to help. Another man saw the same moment and chose fear. One of them saved a life. The other almost destroyed one. And the difference between them wasn't the situation. It was the choice. So remember this. The next time help shows up at your door, make sure you don't mistake it for a threat. What happened to Jamal Reed should never have happened. But the truth is, it happens more often than people are willing to admit. A black boy does the right thing, and still has to prove he belongs in the moment he's needed most. So I want you to answer this honestly. If you were standing on that street, watching everything unfold, what would you have done? Would you have helped? Would you have spoken up? Or would you have stayed silent and let the wrong story win? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe stories like this need to be seen, heard, and remembered, like, subscribe, and share this video. Because silence protects the lie. But truth only wins when people are willing to stand with it.